BRN, where educators share what works.
Most of the time, what ChatGPT outputs is as good or better than anything I could have written to the student. It's in the student's best interest to get that feedback because it's so clear and appropriate. And still this hesitancy that I'm not the authority, I'm not the one giving the information is what's holding me back.
Slightly different motivations with, I feel with my students. The students I'm teaching at the moment are training to be teachers in the future. And so my job is not to train them to be teachers for today. We have to look to the future. We have to look what's changing, and we have to think, what does it mean to be a teacher in the upcoming years?
Good morning, everybody. How you all doing?
Good morning.
So I come to you today for support and for a shoulder to cry on. And again, I got to point to you and to pick your brain, but of course the brain of the group here. I find myself every time I want to engage with AI to help me grade, to give students feedback, to find information that I might not have at the tip of my fingertips. It's almost like I have a possessed hand. I reach to click the browser tab to launch AI, and another personality pulls it back. Took me a few days of that, Dan, to think about it, and then I echoed something that you had brought up some weeks ago about this guilt that teachers feel when we're not spending the enormous amount of hours we seem to think we need to spend on our profession. And I think I just want to talk about that broadly, in the context of AI, of course, but more broadly as well, this teacher guilt that a lot of us experience when we find tools that can lessen the amount of hours we need to put into this job.
Well, I found that to be true even when I first started flipping my class, and I was, making videos. And then as the years went by, and I didn't necessarily need to make a new video because the video that I made was great. It was fine. It worked. But then people don't see you up front lecturing. And they're like, well, you're not really teaching. It's like, no. I'm teaching at every single desk right now. But I felt like I had to justify it because I did feel guilty that I wasn't necessarily working as hard as I had to work in years past. And now with the onset of AI, and we can now do things at an even more rapid pace, it's like, okay, am I now able to actually work within my contracted hours?
Or something must be wrong, right?
Right.
I don't feel guilty at all about using it. I think... The reason for teaching is the students and the time and the interaction with the students, not on all the admin and the other work. So if it can release that load, I feel it energizes me more to interact and to put that energy into my students. So nope, I'm not guilty at all.
Is it releasing that load though, Caroline? Because you're doing so much prep and innovation and course design around AI. Have you reached the point yet where it's making your life easier? Sometimes from what it sounds like you're doing, it might be making your life harder in the short term.
In the short term, yes, but I can see the long term. And also I have to say I'm so excited about everything I'm doing at the moment. It doesn't feel like work at all. It's like a hobby. Right. But I know, this course I'm putting so much effort into because I feel it's so important. But now we can run this again and again and again. Obviously, the technologies will change, but the framework that I'm designing for it, I think, is timeless. So it's worth the effort now for the long run.
Well, and Tom, the same can be said of flip learning. All the time you put in at the beginning, I mean, it's a lot of work to flip a class, but the workload lessens and lessens and lessens as you move forward. And I think the same may be true for our work with AI.
I think I'm in a really cool space in New York at something called a BOCES, where we offer education in very different ways. So one of them is career and technical education. So the conversation of what are different avenues to go towards what is happening in industry right now and in the future doesn't make me feel guilty about using it or trying to share it with my colleagues, because that's our goal, to prep our students for work-based learning, but matching what industry partners want now and what they want in the future. You all know I was a little hesitant about using ChatGPT or some AIs, but when I started using it and got results in seconds, because first I said minutes, and I'm like, no, that really was seconds. And it helped me to go further in what I was doing, and it was a time saver. I didn't really feel guilty about that. It gave me more things to think about and question in a different way. So, yeah, I'm not really feeling guilty either.
Well, Tom, I want to ask this question to the group. Is it a time saver if we do things quickly, but now we have more questions that come up and it takes us down other rabbit trails? Are we saving time, or are we just doing more within the time that we have?
Well, and that's a really good point, because not only doing more, but doing better work, right? Are we offloading our more administrivia work to a bot that can handle it well, so that we can take our skills and our expertise and provide a better experience for our students?
Well, and am I getting my lesson planning done in 30 seconds so I can go spend time with my family? Or am I getting my lesson planning done in 10 seconds so that I can then do additional things that are going to lead me to another 3 hours worth of, typing and doing whatever, but I'm not actually spending time with my family anymore?
Yeah.
I remember when I first started teaching, and I was sitting at my desk all the time at lunchtime and grading and this and that, and a teacher came in and said, I'm going to come get you. You need to come out of that room and you need to come socialize, because that's also so important, right? That building community in the classroom, but also with our colleagues, so that we can learn from them. So she said, there's always work to be done at a desk. So I guess we just have to put parameters on what we're doing.
Well, and I think it also takes that more experienced educator
Yes.
to come alongside you and say, hey, it's okay. The world will not stop spinning if you put your pencil down or your pen down, stop grading, and come and enjoy life for the next 10 minutes.
And you're right, I did feel guilty. I felt like as a new teacher at that time, I needed to be at the desk, need to correct this, need to get this done, need to do that. And you're absolutely right. It took the expertise of someone to come and get me and say, it's okay. And I learned more with the connections of my colleagues than being isolated.
Yeah, I have a mantra with my team, the classic mantra, which is people before paper. People are much more important. You have put that first, put those connections first. The paper is always going to be there, but the people are more important.
You could almost say computer or community before computer then. Yeah, with AI.
Awesome. So Dan, I'll go back to your example with flipped learning, right? I agree, flipped learning is hard, especially on the front end, but it pays off dividends. You could draw the same parallels with the technologies we've been talking about here in AI. But I hope we could all agree that the hypothetical teacher who has students watch other people's videos, has students do in-class activities that are worksheet-based, and spends the entire time sitting at a desk with legs up, drinking a cup of coffee and browsing the latest sports scores, is leaning too heavily on the shortcuts and really not pulling their own weight. Where's that line with AI? Like, where does someone like me feel okay using this tool up to this point and then realize that I've stepped over and I'm not pulling my weight or doing my job?
I did not disagree with what you're saying, because someone's going to abuse this big time. It's the VCR all over again. I knew a teacher who did that in kindergarten. Kids knew how to put in the VCR after lunch, and that was their afternoon. I loved her, but come on now.
So if I put myself in the same shoes of an instructor where maybe I'm using somebody else's videos, and in class I'm not engaging with my students at all, I'm letting students work independently and I'm not getting to know them, I'm not really engaging with my class, I might feel a little bit differently about the way that is running. And I want to know where that line is for AI, for myself. Like, how do I know when I'm leveraging the technology too much And is it the technology that's creating the guilt? In other words, in the old days, when we just stood up there and taught students all day, there was no real opportunity to not be doing that. Now with all of these tools and these technologies, we can begin offloading some of our minutia tasks, some of our administrivia. And is that where the guilt is coming from? Is the guilt coming from the fact that we can do this? And then when should we pull back from over leveraging it?
I think the guilt comes from the profession itself.
Yes.
And that we have, for a very, very long time, there's been high expectation with little pay, and we're working really, really hard. And we've always worked hard. From when you first get a teaching job and you don't know your curriculum well at all, and you've got to figure out your curriculum while trying to figure out how to teach, because we all know we figure out how to teach in a classroom. So you're trying to figure out all of these different things, and we have just exhausted ourselves. Then there's always well, now I need you to do this as well. So there's always this constant adding to our plate, adding to the plate. And the overwhelming feeling that there's always more to do. There's always more to learn. There's always more of everything. And so when we find something that starts to remove things off of our plates, it feels like we're doing less than what's expected.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to justify why I'm doing less.
I remember when I was teaching higher ed teacher candidates, and we were talking about the history of education. And our history of education puts us in that school norm. A teacher is a certain way, and all hours are spent reading, understanding, and for men going to college, and the possibility that a professor might walk up to you, ask you a question, and you need to readily have that answer, or you're not learned. There's something in our profession where we stick with our history. We say it in the way in which our majority of classrooms look. Our rows of desks, our wondering of not letting students move about or learn in the ways in which we learn, the control. And we somehow seem to stick in that old school history of education. And that could be part of the guilt, as Dan was saying, that I'm just always supposed to be in this mode. And if I am not inventing the wheel, then I am not doing my part to create to the better body of knowledge. I think that's what used to bring the guilt for me, that I have to always be doing, as Dan said.
That's exactly, you've captured exactly where my block is. So I think I shared with you all weeks ago that one of the assignments I give to my students weekly is they summarize a chapter that they've read, and they end that summary with at least one question of curiosity or confusion. And a lot of those questions I can address very, very quickly and succinctly, but some of them are either very insightful and deep, or they require a very long explanation. And I do, at times, copy and paste those questions into ChatGPT when I know it's going to take a long time to write out the answer. And invariably, ChatGPT spits out an eloquent, cogent, correct, well-written and clear answer. And I want to just copy and paste that answer into the feedback to the student. That's where that possessed hand comes in. But Julie, to your point, most of the time what ChatGPT outputs is as good or better than anything I could have written to the student. It's in the student's best interest to get that feedback because it's so clear and appropriate. And still this hesitancy that I'm not the authority, I'm not the one giving the information, right, is what's holding me back.
I think there was a switch in education, but not everybody got the notice. It's okay to be the facilitator in the room. Sometimes I even felt the embarrassment or guilt of, I don't know that. Until I went for some training at MIT and was even like, okay, process over product, and if you don't know the answer, let's find out together. But that's more important, teaching someone the skill of how to, than me just giving you a direct answer. What are you learning? I'm just telling you it's a yes or no to your answer, as opposed to me teaching you the skills of how to find out?
For me, it's also this idea that I am a teacher. My being is a teacher.
Yeah, personal identity.
Yeah. And so when I see that, and I agree with Caroline when she said, I don't view what I do as just a job. It's fun. But that fun then begins to wrap into everything that we do. So that even when I go on vacation, I'm looking at educational aspects of my vacation and how I can apply where we are to my classroom and different things like that. It starts to consume our lives and our identity as a teacher. And so when we start to streamline what we're doing with AI, there is some guilt of, you mean I can actually just go have fun? I can just enjoy time with my family? And it doesn't have to be an educational experience? Am I cheating my job because I'm not working as diligently or as hard as I needed to in the past? And I feel like I'm cheating my role as a teacher because it's also cheating my character as a teacher of investing all this time into research and, applying and all of these different aspects of my job that now I can, hand off essentially to AI to figure out very, very quickly what I need to do or how I need to do it. I think because it connects so tightly to our being as a teacher, there's guilt there.
But I would say that any caring profession, I think you would have the same feelings. You get into teaching or nursing to help people, and it's very difficult to switch off from that because it's our personalities that draw us to these kind of jobs. So I do think it's quite intrinsic in a way that we do keep giving so much. For me, I found the line twice in my career. I have burnt out very, very badly and had to stop. And now I'm much more aware of how much I give. And so if I find something that's going to help me, I am going to use that. Because it keeps me a better teacher, a better person, because I'm more energized and I can focus on life better.
So I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable here, I guess, but I'm among friends. I, like Dan, have teacher as part of my self-identity. In fact, when I introduce myself to my students, I tell them that my 3 words of self-identity in ranked order is father, teacher, husband. So it means something to me to be an educator. It's a big part of how I see myself. And I will confess that much of what I've been calling guilt so far is also fear. Because as much as I give to my students in many other contexts, in front of the classroom, one-on-one instruction, all of the intangibles, and I have a great deal of pride for that and a good confidence that I'm high impact in those actions, if I go back to what I described earlier in how I'm leveraging AI most effectively, I'm copying and pasting a student question into AI, and then I'm copying and pasting AI's response back to the student. And I think that there's a visceral fear that, like, hey, just cut out the middleman. Like, look, why am I needed for this cut and paste chain?
Can I make a suggestion, Tom, about it? So I think do cut out the middleman, but in fact, it's a different role. So if you're taking those students' questions that they're posing and you're using AI and then copying and pasting the answer in, why aren't they doing that themselves to try and find the answers themselves? But then your role is to look at what they've come up with. Have they correctly identified the answer? Have they correctly answered their question? It's the feedback at that point I feel is more relevant. And that way it's teaching themselves to try and answer their own questions. That's the role of the teacher.
Do you think, Caroline, you, and of course the group, Julie and Dan as well, do you think that fear is one barrier to educators leveraging AI in general, this idea of replacement?
I don't think it's necessarily a fear of replacement, but it's a fear of, am I doing my job? Will other people see me doing my job? Because we all want to be acknowledged as being good at our job. If I start taking shortcuts, we get frustrated with students when they take shortcuts. And we're like, no, you're not actually learning. If you're just taking a shortcut, you're not learning it. And you're just getting to an answer, but you don't know the process of getting to that answer. Do we feel the same way? That now our employer sees us as taking shortcuts instead of doing the process?
The process has changed. Things are changing so fast. And like Julie talked about, I think the education system is quite often fossilized. It's in the past. I think the most important thing we can teach our students right now is to become lifelong learners and to constantly question and look and try and answer questions for themselves. So instead, again, it's not that product, it's the process. It's teaching them how to do that. And if there are tools to do that, great. But we have to teach them how to go through that process properly so that they're still learning.
When you say the process has changed, do you mean the process of teaching and learning? Like, what process are you referring to?
The process of getting information so quickly. As I'm thinking in a second. But what we do with that information is really important. How we critique it, how we evaluate it, how we use it. That's where we need to be teaching our students these days, not just accepting what comes out.
Right.
Two things. I think some people are afraid. I think when AI first came out, or when robots or technology first came out, I had a little fear about, will something automated take away part of my job? So that is a fear for me. I see that as I drive the highway. Where's the toll booth taker?
Right.
And where did they go? And so will that happen in education? I don't think we're there yet, because there's so much, I think, to unpack. With everybody having to be on the same page in regards to how the technologies can assist and help.
Right. One of the things that's becoming transformative to me from this conversation is if there is a tool out there that makes my workload lighter and provides my students with better feedback and information, I'm actually engaging in a selfishness by not using that tool, because I could very well be giving my students lesser feedback. My fear about being replaced and my guilt about having to flagellate myself with work is perhaps diminishing the product that my students are getting. It reminds me of, back way back, I was on some university curricular redesign committees, and there was this kind of turf tribalism of protecting certain programs or certain courses more out of a self-preservation mindset than a what's best for the student experience mindset. And I have to start recognizing that I was doing a little bit of that myself in how I was engaging in AI. My students can get a better experience and I get a quicker grading experience. How could I not be leveraging this tool?
Slightly different motivations I feel with my students. The students I'm teaching at the moment are training to be teachers in the future. And so my job is not to train them to be teachers for today. We have to look to the future. We have to look what's changing. We have to think, what are their aims? What does it mean to be a teacher in the upcoming years? So for me, investigating this with my students is helping them. They need to be learning what I'm learning so they can use this when they are teachers in the future.
Going back to fear, it just made me think of the first time a student questioned me in class, and I froze because they had some knowledge I didn't have. And I didn't know what to do with that. And this was elementary school. And I really was frozen. And again, it just took me some training and work and conversation to again realize I didn't need to know everything, that I can learn from my students as well. Again, to be that facilitator. And it's okay to go, oh, hey, tell me more about that. I want to hear that. The finesse that we have as educators to work within our class. So I shouldn't have a guilt.
Right.
I can just imagine when the printing press came out and teachers suddenly all the students had books with all the information in there, when before it only came from the instructor. They would have been having exactly the same kind of conversation that we're having now, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
true.
Right. 20 years from now, someone's going to have a different conversation about some other technology.
Yeah, right. The robot in the class.
The hologram.
All right, so I really appreciate the group therapy you've all provided me with here. This is exactly what I needed to hear. If I could just tap you all one last time as we finish up our coffee and pay the bill, what do you all do to ensure that you are balancing personal and professional time? Like, what barriers have you set up for yourselves? What reminders do you have in place? How do you know when it's time to pull back from the job?
That's a really good question, and one I'm still struggling with.
I'm still struggling with that one too.
I asked my husband to help make me a schedule.
I would say red wine and Prozac, but
Red wine and Prozac.
Yeah, there we go. Well, I guess then this is something that we all need to work on in education, right? I didn't think I was going to stump you all, but I think as we as a society recover from COVID, right, we're still burnt out from all of that. It's high time that we balance our personal demands with our professional pulls and obligations. And maybe this group that we have here, these conversations that we have, is the perfect forum because we now have a tool at our fingertips that can truly lighten our load. And maybe it's time we all leverage that tool a little bit more. You all have a wonderful week, and I wish you all a healthy, complete, and fair work-life balance. Have a great one, guys. I'll see you soon.
You too.
Take care.
You can see links to all the tools mentioned in this episode in the show notes. Thanks for listening.